I knew that after the election, the people who lost everything in Hurricane Helene would most likely be forgotten about, because the news cycle moves so quickly and there's so much going on. I knew that at the very least, they probably would not be getting much media coverage anymore. And that's why I'm here right now, to still try to get the story out, because there's still people missing. And I know people are tired of hearing about it. It feels like we've talked about everything that we could have. I even feel like I've said everything that I could say. But at the end of the day, we still got people who need help. And they don't have a platform. Many of them don't have a voice to get the word out there about what they're going through. So I'm trying to use my small platform to do what I can. And I'm hoping those of you all watching this video, I'm hoping that you share my videos, or at the very least, spread the word, because people need to know. And maybe now that we're going to be under new leadership, maybe these people can start getting some better help. Who knows? But there is one thing about these storms that is in the news right now. And of course, I've already talked about it in multiple videos. But I do not want to just gloss over this, because this is a huge deal. You know, a FEMA worker got caught directing other FEMA workers to not help Trump supporters after Hurricane Milton. And I think that this is such a huge deal, because not only do I 100% believe, basically know, that this same stuff is happening in North Carolina after Hurricane Helene. We watched. It didn't make sense. The response didn't make sense. The stuff they were doing, they were literally sabotaging donation areas. Why do you think they were doing that? Because they hate those people, because they assume that those people support a certain somebody or voted a certain way. And that was something I suspected, but it's something that we know for a fact now. We have the evidence. FEMA has even admitted it. So my point is this. I think this is much bigger than just the story going on in Florida. And yes, I do think this is happening in North Carolina, but I want to take it a step further. Think about the various stories I've covered on this channel in the past. Think about stuff like the chemical spill in East Palestine, Ohio. Think about the other storms and all of the devastation we've covered. Think about the response that we've seen from these government agencies in certain areas and how it's been so lackluster, or how they basically work against the people. Now, we have a better idea as to why. I believe now we know why. Why were the people of East Palestine, Ohio abandoned? Why were they treated the way they were treated? Well, maybe because they were going to vote a certain way. I mean, I think that we have to look at what we have here. I think this is a crack in the armor, if you will. We're starting to get a peek behind the curtains. And I can tell you it's way worse than what people think. But I think that right now we kind of have an answer to a lot of the stories that I've covered in the past. And not just stories I've covered, but other stories out there in general. Now we know. Now we have evidence about what's going on in these agencies. That these agencies are told to help certain parts of the country, certain people, and they're told not to help others. So you can dig through the past, you can go through all types of situations, and you can lay them out, and now you have a valid explanation as to why FEMA and these other agencies were doing things that were downright just disgusting. They weren't helping. If anything, they were doing the exact opposite. They were hurting these situations. But I want to go ahead and roll this news clip, because luckily this is getting a little bit of news coverage, and then I'll be right back with more thoughts.
FEMA has fired one of its supervisors after it was discovered that in the wake of Hurricane Milton last month, she apparently instructed relief workers going door to door in Florida to skip the homes of Trump supporters. It is outrageous, and on the surface would seem to validate concerns from those on the right who accuse the agency of punishing Republicans by withholding aid in the aftermath of Hurricanes Helene and Milton. Up to this point, there was really nothing concrete to back that up. And it's a story that sort of got buried over the weekend with everything else going on. The Daily Wire broke it, reporting that at least 20 homes with Trump signs or flags were skipped from the end of October and into November due to the guidance. This happened in and around Lake Placid, Florida, where a tornado touched down in the days leading up to Milton, making landfall, and which saw wind and flood damage following the storm. 20 families, at least, apparently didn't get the help they may have needed from the very agency whose job it is to help them when disaster strikes, because they displayed public indicators of their political affiliation. That is horrifying. Now, when I first heard about it and noticed there wasn't much media coverage of it, in particular on a major website that I own called Mediaite, I reached out to my own site and pitched them and said, hey, why are we not covering this more? Particularly when FEMA confirmed the report, seemingly validating fears we saw take hold in North Carolina, for example, following incredible damage caused by flooding from Helene. People who lost everything were afraid or unwilling to ask for help because of distrust of FEMA. I'm reminded of a caller from my radio show on Sirius XM whose father-in-law was so distrustful of the feds, he said he'd rather go without eating than get help from them.
And it's hard to even imagine it. I mean, he lost almost everything, and he's refusing all help from the federal government and complaining to us that he doesn't have food, that he doesn't have the stuff he needs, and yet he won't accept the help. What the hell are we supposed to do? We're not in a position to be able to fly across the country and help him. Yeah. There's people begging us to get him to accept help, and he won't do it. And I guarantee you, I'm not the only one. I guarantee you, I'm not the only one.
And that's exactly why we need to report on this stuff when it actually does happen. So we can also debunk the false rumors and false accusations, as we did in North Carolina. But let's also remember, FEMA got rid of this person pretty quickly. There's nothing at this point to indicate her guidance came from above. The supervisor, Marnie Washington, is also now under investigation by FEMA's Office of Special Counsel, the House Oversight Committee, and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis also launching their own investigations. By the way, kudos to the FEMA workers who blew the whistle. Look, you can have bad apples that can give an entire agency a bad name, but let's bring back Democratic Congressman Jared Moskowitz, a member of the House Oversight Committee, who also served as Director of Emergency Management under Governor DeSantis. Congressman, do you know anything more about how this happened?
No, we don't have any more details. Obviously, Oversight's going to launch an investigation. I support that investigation. As someone who was the former Director of Emergency Management in Florida, a Democrat in a Republican administration, one of the things that is sacrosanct in the emergency management industry is to stay nonpartisan, apartisan. Disasters don't affect Democrats or Republicans. They don't hit MAGA or progressives. They hit neighborhoods. They hit communities. They hit all people. And this sort of stuff feeds into the worst things that people think about government in general. And while we're entering the most partisan times, the most divided times, people have lost faith in their institutions. FEMA needs to stay out of that. They have to stay out of that. Watching colleagues of mine, using misinformation, talking about weather machines, trying to make FEMA partisan. We cannot allow disasters and disaster response to become partisan. We have to fight to keep it nonpartisan. So we should call it out when it happens on both sides to make sure that we're telling the truth. And it was important in North Carolina to do that, and it's just as important to do here. What happened in Florida is unacceptable. We could not have Americans not getting care based on their political affiliation.
Congressman, the supervisor, Washington, spoke to the Washington Examiner, actually, and she says she let her supervisors know specific streets we could not do because of hostile political encounters. And according to communications obtained by the Examiner, she was encouraged and supported in her decision to avoid certain streets to, quote, keep them safe. FEMA workers, quote, were having their lives threatened. And then the report goes on to say several of these hostile encounters are documented in the media. But the supervisor, Washington, is demanding FEMA turn over incident reports showing additional hostilities that resulted in her having to avoid certain streets. What do you make of that?
We'll have to see the evidence. okay, of that if there were individual hostilities, and that should have been reported. But my guess is that one person may being hostile doesn't mean all of a sudden you generalize and start skipping houses. It also means that if they were having individual hostilities, they still should have figured out to make sure that that person was aware and got all of the benefits that they were due. There's a way to handle that. And so this instance, the way it went down, I applaud the administrator for firing the person immediately. That was the right decision. But now the FEMA needs to comply with the investigation and oversight, because we got to make sure that this doesn't now go into the Trump administration. We can't have whoever becomes the FEMA administrator there or low-level people there thinking that they're going to skip Democratic homes. We got to make sure we get rid of that at all levels.
Yep. All right, Congressman Moskowitz, thanks a lot for taking all the time with us tonight. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Dan. Appreciate it.
I always find it funny when the mainstream media is kind of like forced to cover these kind of stories for a minute, because they bring people on and you can tell that they're not just being 100% honest about the situation. They don't want to say certain things, and often they say stupid things. But, the supervisor who gave the order to avoid the Trump homes, she's been fired. I don't think that's enough. I don't think firing someone from their job is enough of a punishment for what she has done. I think she belongs in jail, if you ask me. Do any of you all agree? Think about the fact that people could have died because of her. And I'll take it there. I'm not going to say people died because of her specifically, in this situation. But yes, people have died because FEMA has and other agencies haven't helped them because of how they voted. You think this is just one rogue person in FEMA doing this? No. There's a reason why she felt so comfortable doing this. You got to understand, this isn't like a whisper network where she was whispering in people's ears, telling them, hey, avoid Trump homes. No, this is on official documents. You know what I mean? She's officially telling these people this stuff. We got the text messages, we got paperwork, we got all that. So there had to be some type of culture within FEMA. There had to be some type of ideology or a common way of thinking within this organization that made her feel comfortable enough to do this, that made her feel okay to do this. And yes, she can be the scapegoat now, and FEMA can act like she's the only one and place all the heat on her, but I guarantee you there's dozens like her. There's dozens like her in this agency and in other agencies, some of which are honestly DEI hires and have no business even having the positions that they have. But that's where we're at in this country, and it's funny because some people get mad at me when I criticize FEMA, but were you mad when Kanye West criticized FEMA? Were you mad when he said George Bush only cares or doesn't care about black people or something like that after Hurricane Katrina? Because it's funny that back then it was okay to criticize FEMA, during Hurricane Katrina, but it's not okay to criticize FEMA during Hurricane Helene. Think about that. Why is that? Is it because the people who were affected by Hurricane Katrina were voting one way and the people affected by Hurricane Helene are voting the other way? Really think about it. No one ever had an issue criticizing these government organizations in the past or in certain other portions and times in history. But, it's a problem if you criticize the response to Hurricane Helene. Why? Because they're getting defensive, because they know exactly what they're doing. It's not hard to see. A lot of us saw it from day one, but we wanted to believe otherwise. And I gave FEMA, I gave everyone involved the benefit of the doubt, and they did not deserve it, because look at where we're at now. Look at what we're talking about. It's absolutely disgusting when you think about it. And like I said, even though this story has kind of gone away, I hope and pray that this news gets out there far and wide, because people need to know. Because another disaster can happen tomorrow. Hurricane season isn't even over yet. You know what I mean? So, hey, let me know what you think, though, about all of this down in the comments below. While you're down there, hit that thumbs up, hit that subscribe, ring that notification bell, and I'll talk to you all very soon in the next one.